I have been reading and writing about customer experience for many years, and that is by far the best definition I've ever heard. So thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. I think I read it in a book about a con man once, but like always make it as easy as possible for people to give you money, right?
I
Like
love it.
that's really all business comes down to. And building a customer loyalty program is just making it easy for them to give you money over and over and over.
Welcome to Travel Buddy, presented by Switchfly. In this podcast, we talk about all things travel, rewards, and loyalty. Let's get to it. James and Ian, welcome to another episode of the Travel Buddy podcast. And today we are going to talk about travel, rewards, and loyalty. We've talked about some of this in earlier episodes, but I know there's a lot more distinctions to be made between travel and rewards and, what's going on in this landscape because it is a big landscape. Like last time we talked about there's wellness and then there's perks and all of this. And then you get into some of the travel specific things and there's OTAs, there's direct providers, there's just so much going on. So we want to keep teasing that out a bit. And so I think a good way to start would be, Ian, if you could tell us a little bit about the difference between travel and rewards and why the heck companies are wanting to do this anyway. Different nuances of what we haven't covered before, maybe some ROI statistics and the value of travel rewards and all of that. But I'll let you take it away on like kind of summarize that idea for us.
Yeah. Um, so it's an older concept, obviously, between and the differentiation between rewards and loyalty, right? I think you can think of it most directly in short versus long term, right? A travel rewards or any sort of customer rewards in whatever the industry is generally meant to boost short term sales, right? You'll see buy one, get one weekends or, 50% off or whatever the specific case may be. Those are meant to encourage sort of boosts over the short term. When we talk about customer loyalty, what we're really referring to is that long-term brand loyalty buildup that a customer will have over time, and that relationship the company will have with a specific customer over time. There, especially the term rewards gets thrown out a lot, and sometimes um, people mean it interchangeably with loyalty, but they really are two separate things. Although they're often uh, they dovetail together very nicely. You can all we'll see companies offering specific rewards to their loyalty members, right? So they don't necessarily mean the same thing, but they can uh, uh, work together and are often referred to in the same way. Um, Customer loyalty is I think as I mentioned, it's a very old idea, but it's really been kind of focused and studied only recently. Only over the past couple of decades have brands really been diving into what exactly is customer loyalty and that becoming its own area of study within businesses. Um, retaining retaining customers is vital to all companies, right? There's multiple surveys that talk about uh, the on the low end, you'll see like 33 to 40%. On the high end, 70 to 80% of a company's revenue is from repeat business. Um, and almost always a repeat customer will spend more than a new customer, right? And it just once you kind of stop and think about it a little bit, it makes intuitive sense, right? You've purchased this company's products before, you've traveled that airline, you've stayed at that hotel, whatever. You know what you're getting. You're willing to spend more um, to get the next thing. Or okay, so if I got the the one bedroom suite at whatever hotel last time, well, maybe now, and it was great experience. Now I'm going to be willing to pay a little extra to get the balcony suite or, whatever, the suite facing the ocean. Um, you have a level of expectation set with that first purchase, and a level of comfort that you're willing to spend more. Um, and that's essentially all customer loyalty is, right? Is building that level of comfort with the brand, getting them to recognize and expect a certain value from what they're buying, and then routinely delivering it. Um, and like I said, I mean, such a large percentage of companies' profits come from repeat business. It only makes sense for companies to focus a large part of their marketing and sales budgets towards re-engaging repeat buyers. Um, and that, there's a number of different ways to do that. There's uh, subscription programs, there's long-term contracts, there's um, uh, you know specific offerings like reward offerings to repeat business. Um, there are many different ways to kind of get towards that engagement with your previous customers. And it's all about just sort of finding the right mix and balance for for that particular company. One of the most common ways to do that, especially in the travel industry, is through point systems, right? The more you buy, the more points you can build up. And then those points can be substituted to make future purchases. Um, the the point system is ubiquitous throughout the travel industry. Almost every airline will have one. I mean, every major airline will have one. Most small and intermediate airlines are starting to have them. Um, Hotels, car rental agencies, uh, at theme parks, almost any sort of. I mean, heck, I took my sons and I to a movie this week, and the during the previews for at the beginning of the movie, there's a commercial about, hey, make sure you talk to the people out front to get your card, um, for when you come to the movies. So really up and down the board in the travel industry, you're gonna have reward systems and loyalty systems, and it's all about creating an easy way for people to keep spending money at your particular company, and and providing incentive for them to do that.
Just to kind of tag onto that too, Ian, it's also a huge ancillary revenue driver. Looking at some of these like co-brand credit cards, there's airlines that make more on their credit cards than flying. Which the first time you hear it, it kind of makes your head spin. But I mean, it makes a lot more sense too. I mean, how many nights you're going to spend in a hotel? How many flights does the average traveler book? This is a way, a lot of these more innovative vendors are even leading into like, how do we have a repeat relationship outside of, just the core of the business? Like, I mean, it's a pretty recent field too. I think the first co-brand credit card was 89, late 80s, don't quote me. With the American Airlines, who is also a Switchfly customer. But I just had to jump into touch on
Yeah,
ancillary revenue. I think that is a podcast in and of itself.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, now almost every credit card is some sort of co-brand, right? Like there's
Mhm.
some sort of point system. And even if it's just through your bank, you're more than likely going to have a rewards system with that bank who has partnerships with external vendors that you can then buy with your bank's credit card points. You can buy, Amazon gift cards or American Airlines or, Chili's dinners or, whatever um, partnerships that they developed. So I think we're just going to keep seeing more and more of that co-brand relationship building between companies. There's a book I read. God, this would have had to been 20 years ago at least. But uh, when I was thinking about this podcast, it made me think of this book. It's called Jennifer Government, and it's this weird kind of uh, dystopian future. Think of 1984, but instead of a totalitarianism government, it's pure capitalism. Like the government's been privatized. So you have to subscribe to your local police department or ambulance service or things. And, and it's really all about this idea of co-branding and these kind of larger conglomerative uh, corporations just keep working together to build these loyalty programs that end up competing over customers. Um, yeah, Jennifer Government by Max Berry, definitely a really interesting read if you ever got the time. But
Okay, I love 1984, so I have to check this out. I've also heard David Foster Wallace did the same thing in Infinite Jest, where he
yeah,
was like, "This is the year of Depends underwear, 2024 or whatever it is."
right. The
Funny.
in Jennifer Government, your last name is the name of who you work for. So I would be Ian
That's
Switchfly.
great.
Yeah, and
That's great.
it's definitely a wonderful little quick read. But I mean, it just another point to like how ubiquitous this is coming throughout business in general and travel, and definitely the travel industry. And I mean, routinely the numbers just speak for themselves, right? Like um, program owners, I think 90% of them in the travel space, according to Evento, have positive ROI from their loyalty program. So like 90% of people are seeing positive ROI. And that the average is something like 500%. And uh, so, again, when you stop and kind of consider it, it sort of makes intuitive sense of it costs less to re-engage a previous customer than it does to acquire a new customer, right? You've already had at least a minimum of relationship building with them. And that's all, like if you boiled all customer loyalty down to like one concept, it is just relationship building and building that brand identity with your customers of um, I know what I'm talking about. I offer a good product. You know, if there's problems, you can come to me and we'll fix them, in a, reasonable manner. Like it's just how can we build that relationship and develop that level of comfort to where I'm the first person you think of the next time you want to go purchase the same or similar thing. Um, and we all have those relationships, if you want to call them, built into our head that at times we don't even think of. I go to the same place that change my oil every time. And one, it's just convenient. It's not far from me. Um, but really it's because they do a good job quickly and I don't have to think about it. Right. I just go, and they're within the same driving distance, probably at least five or six other places I could get my oil change, but I just go there.
And that ties into something you were talking to before we hit record about how there can be a disconnect between the people running these loyalty programs and the mind of the customer, right? Like, th- there was even a stat you were talking about where, like, there's a delta. And to your point, Ian, like the customer, one is always right, but two, that experience plays into this loyalty too. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So customer experience, right, is at the heart of it all. It's all about, um, you have a certain expectation as a customer to whatever you're buying, whether it's an oil change or a flight to Europe. There's a certain level of expectation you're going into it. Even if you've never purchased this thing before, you have an idea of what you're going to get. And then not only from the company side, not only meeting that idea of what the customer has, but trying to exceed it and make it a better experience, um, just plays such a heavy part of building that relationship. Um, and it's a word that gets, or a phrase that gets thrown out so often, customer experience, or, in the digital space, user experience. But really it's all about how do we make this as easy as possible for them to give you money, right? That's all this is. How do we make this as super easy as for them to buy what you have? And that's making it easy for them to actually come find the product they want, identify the value of it, and then uh, make the transaction. But then following through with it, providing a good customer experience overall, as far as providing a good product. Um, or if the situation warrants, having good customer service to mitigate any issues. Uh, and all that leads to making it easy for them to give you money again. Right. And that's all customer loyalty is just building that relationship through a good experience. So then they will continue to give you money. And then
You know,
providing
I
incentives. Oh, good.
I I have been reading and writing about customer experience for many years, and that is by far the best definition I've ever heard. So thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. I think I read it in a book about a con man once, but like always make it as easy as possible for people to give you money, right?
I
Like
love it.
that's really all business comes down to. And building a customer loyalty program is just making it easy for them to give you money over and over and over. Um, and through incentives and through a good customer experience is how you do that. I just like researching this, coming across some of the statistics that are out there, it makes it baffling that people don't spend more effort on their loyalty programs sometimes, just because, the the sheer amount of revenue that is generated through loyalty programs, through repeat business, is mind-boggling. And like we've said over and over, the ROI on it is way, way higher than generating new business, right? 81% of program owners confirmed that their loyalty program was really helpful during the pandemic and kind of post economic downturn. How many companies, just think of how many companies went out of business during that time frame, but how many stayed open because they had that sort of loyalty built up, right? And were able to kind of use that enough to bridge the gap to where when the economy started turning up again, they were able to then generate more new business. Um, you know, two times or roughly 200% of companies want to increase their investment in retention rather than acquisition. So it means that people are really recognizing this loyalty and customer retention space, and want to focus and invest in their loyalty programs to ensure they're getting that repeat business.
I would love to share a stat that's kind of adjacent, but definitely there is space too for any organization to disrupt competition. Focusrite, one of our travel partners, shared a stat. Companies have a drastically different perception of customer loyalty compared to customers. A 2023 PwC survey found 60% of company execs perceive their customers to be more loyal than before the pandemic, what you just talked about. But sadly, only 20% of consumers share that perspective. And I think that's a really, not only does experience play a factor there, but there's definitely a rewards make up part of that delta too.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's a huge opportunity to continue to, retool, research and really revisit, like, is our program really up to snuff, or are we, kind of setting ourselves up to be disrupted? Would love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like as a customer, the customer loyalty is really uh, I don't know, an odd concept in some ways, right? Like if I'm buying something, why does loyalty to a brand, why should that matter? If I want a specific thing, why should I care who's giving it to me as long as it's at the price point I'm willing to pay and the value I'm willing to get out of it? Like, what does it matter that I'm loyal to a specific company or not? And I think that's a lot where the delta comes from. Obviously, like if I have if I'm running a company and I have, a whole list of previous customers, and then all of a sudden I decide to double the amount I charge for my product and expect those customers to stay loyal to, without changing anything else. I'm just going to double the price when I have plenty of competitors out there who charge less. Like, why would they stay loyal? That it doesn't really make sense. So ke- bridging that delta between the value that companies perceive on their loyalty program versus what consumers do is all about um, trying to get into that customer mindset of why should they stay loyal? Am I offering a good product? Is it providing the value comparable to my competitors out there, or better than? What is my value prop? And continually, you know, reanalyzing the industry I'm in, what my customers are looking for, what consumers in general are looking for, what my competitors are doing, and what I do better than my competitors that I can focus on and use as my selling point. Um, and and just by taking that mindset of constantly be thinking about the industry, about the overall space, about my competitors, and why would somebody want to buy my product? Uh, I
And
think will go a long ways to bridging that gap.
and a good litmus test for what you just said is our brand promise relevant and are we leading up to it or living up to it, excuse me. There's actually
So
a real-time case study in the last couple weeks, I believe, with a Wendy's where, like everyone knows them. They're in pretty much every town in America. Um, but they floated out, I think it was an investor call. They're talking about dynamic pricing or like the surge type pricing that we see with like some of the ride sharing apps or the ride hailing. And people were livid. This is a brand that our parents grew up with. We've probably all been to. And the idea that I'm going to pay a different price than you or Brandon because I showed up at 5 minutes before, an hour later, like that, that flies directly in front of their ethos. And kind of to tie it all back, it's like, what is the experience you're providing? And if you're like, is your brand matching the marketplace or the customer expectations? Because what I also heard in um, the feedback you shared, Ian, was, kind of the generational differences we're seeing between the boomers and the Gen X. Gen X is a lot more prove it to me. And millennials and Gen Z definitely have a little bit of that too, where, going back to the McKinsey study we always talk about, like people are willing to make a change. And it's not, like my parents would stick around because, they're loyal to like picking on car makers, they're loyal to domestics up until they tried a Toyota and it was just such a better experience. They moved over to it. And I think, regardless of the size of product or purchase.
so something we haven't talked about yet, but is vital to all of this is the technology, right? And
Mhm.
the rise of the internet. I mean, how much does the rise of the internet play into that loyalty mind space that you're talking about generationally? Our
Mhm.
grandparents and great grandparents might have had one place that they could get the oil changed. Going back to my theme, where they just did not have the options, right? You might have
Mhm.
back in the day, how many major airlines were there? You had what, like TWA and I don't American. I think that was one of the earlier ones, but like you might have had one or two options. Now, even if you're bringing low cost carriers into the mix, you got tons of options, right? And I mean, name an industry that you don't have more options easier at your fingertips than we did 20, 40, 60 years ago. Uh, and I think that is really driving that break between, you know, quote unquote loyalty. I mean, how hard is it to be loyal to the general store in town when they're the only general store in town? Then customer loyalty is kind of a moot point. But when I can jump on Amazon, when I can, jump on Walmart Plus or whatever and get uh, whatever thing I need um, from half a dozen places without leaving my couch, uh, customer loyalty becomes a bit more nebulous, but also more important, right? So, um, more important for those companies trying to make sure that they're generating that repeat business. Monopolies have sort of gone the way of the dodo. We, especially with like new technologies like 3D printing and AI and stuff that we're starting to see these resurgences of manufacturing being brought back to the US that was divested in the 70s, when it cost somebody, actually read an article about this, I don't know, 6, 8 months ago. So I'm fuzzy on the details, but it was talking about textiles, the textile industry. The US for 100 years between the mid 19th and 20th centuries was the world leader in textile industry, right? We had the cotton, um, and large scale manufacturing that most places in the world didn't have. Now the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s hit, the employment pricing or, cost of employing labor, the land value, all this stuff in the US is really rising. It's now costing more. Now we're exporting, that manufacturing across, into Mexico, into China, into other areas. Uh, Logistics are then getting good enough to make it a negligible issue of where if your t-shirt is made in China versus whether it's made in Milwaukee or, wherever. Um, and now with the rise of like new, smaller technologies, we're seeing a lot of that textile industry, manufacturing industry come back to the United States because before I would have needed to build a giant plant, these huge carding machines, these huge like knitting machines, like all that. I need so much space and so many employees to be able to crank out 1,000 t-shirts. Uh, where with newer technologies, we can see a much smaller scale be able to match the production value that a large scale manufacturing plant would have done back in the 70s, and seeing a lot of that manufacturing come back to the US. Um, so how does the new technologies then tie into this whole nebulous idea of customer loyalty? Um, Obviously, the options it provides through the internet, the fact that we all have one of these never more than arm's reach away from us, that is the most powerful tool ever created in the history of our world, right? Where all of us at any time can get information on anything. Um, it's a new world, and we have to think about loyalty differently than our parents and grandparents.
Let the record show that Ian held up a phone,
Oh,
an
yeah,
iPhone,
sorry.
for our
It's
audio
actually
listeners.
it's
Just
actually,
kidding.
and my wife makes fun of me constantly because it's a phone wallet. I got all my
There you go.
cards and everything, and she says that's like your now old tool. Like when you start combining those like things into, oh, you have your phone wallet. And I think it's the greatest thing ever existed. And she goes, oh, now you're clearly, that's the new line of, this is when you're old. Used to be like buying a minivan or something, but now it's combining your daily conveniences into one
Is
tool.
your AARP card in there? Do you know? Hey,
Not yet, although I got a mailer from AARP not long ago, addressed to the lady I bought the house from. So it wasn't addressed to me, thankfully, but there was a moment before I saw the name that made me think about it.
Don't knock minivans either. The Toyota Sienna Hybrid has 19 cup holders and 35 to the gallon. Like those
I
are impressive stats. Yeah,
I
that's
always,
impressive.
I always used to joke that minivans are the Walmart of vehicles. Nobody likes it, but everybody uses it just because it's so convenient.
That's
Oh,
Well, on that note,
okay. So one last point, technology wise, um, the reason your phone is so important. Obviously, uh, mobile apps are a huge part of engagement. How virtually every brand you buy from has their own app now that you can log into. You can check your points value. You can check any deals or rewards going on. Um, and it's all about that idea of making it easier for people to find you and to give you money to buy your product. And that customer experience, if you make a good app that's easy to use, has a nice user interface that it provides good engagement as far as the email cadence that you're getting sent, the text messages they're sending out as far as rewards programs or special deals, things like that. That all sort of ties into this overall concept of building the brand relationship. And it's just going to get higher and go faster.
So, okay, so we talked a lot about all kinds of different, loyalty, rewards, definitions, the technologies, use cases. But I'd love to hear from y'all. What is a I don't know, loyalty provider or, brand or experience that you had recently or that you've seen out there in the world that you were like, man, that is cool. Like if my oil change place did that, I'd be a huge fan, or whatever. Like, is there anything like that that you just seen that's, man, that's super cool. And I think that increases my loyalty to that brand.
so one of the standouts I've seen is actually the Delta Late Baggage Guarantee. And that's a program where if you're flying on Delta with a checked bag and it takes over 20 minutes from landing for that bag to make it to the carousel, they'll give you 2,500 points, which on any domestic legs, you're probably coming out ahead with that bag compared to the points accrued or the miles accrued, excuse me, on your flight. And I mean, literally, I've had it where it was 21 minutes, and within half an hour, I have those points sitting in my um, app. I mean, you do have to do a like 6 question form fill, so you do have to take a step on it. But the fact that one, they'd be willing to do that in the era that it feels like everything, including the seat, is an upgrade these days on most of those carriers.
Yeah.
It's just a unique program, and it's one that's been around for a minute. Fingers crossed it stays. Now that I'm airing it, but and just like the prices go up, things don't get cheaper, but um, Delta's one of those experiences where like I know I'm going to get my bag. I know they're going to take care of me if something happens, and that program is another little data point that they're putting the customer first.
I think that's a great example because it gets the economics of loyalty right. It makes the customer happy because they want to get out of there faster, but it also makes the business run better because it's more efficient and it's faster and keeps things moving along and it penalizes the company if they don't do their job well. And so it aligns all those incentives, which I think is really cool.
And it
Yeah,
also means I'm
no,
going to
that's
come back to redeem those points.
yeah. Exactly. Uh, one example, and I don't know if this is a good example or not. I haven't made up my mind yet. And it's not even necessarily a new one, but Menards. It's one I have thought about recently because I generally there's a Menards not too far from me, but there's some other places closer, so I don't make it there that often. But they still do rebates rather than rewards. Um, and you kind of have to print it off and mail it in with receipts and stuff. So it's a bit of an extra step in there. And this is what causes me to question it is like everything I've been talking about is about making it easier for customers. And this is actually a way that makes things a little bit harder, but it offers a pretty high value. They did I think on the receipt I got was like up to 30% of a rebate, which is pretty substantial. right? So, um, making people take that extra step, uh, but giving a comparatively high reward for it. And, there is a trade-off there. And I'm not sure entirely where I land on that yet, but it is a good example of like, you know, if you provide enough value, people generally are willing to do a little bit more. Um, so, I guess it's working for them, or else they wouldn't still be using it after however many years of their rebate program. But yeah, I need a noodle on that one a little bit more.
And for those
Well,
that haven't been to a Menards, it's basically a combination Home Depot Tractor Supply in the Midwest. It's literally the country store where you can buy milk to hammers. Yeah, it's a bit of everything, but it's specific to the Midwest in case anyone is listening from a coast.
I have never heard of this, so I'm glad you said that. I had no idea what you were talking about. Well, I've gotta go in the opposite direction and say, I just want things done for me. And so my thing an example is, the Venture card from Capital One or the American Express Platinum. Both of them do this, where if I book a travel something, travel, like buy an airline ticket or hotel or whatever, and I accrue my points, I can retroactively, weeks later, go back to that purchase and say, "Erase from my credit card." And I love how easy that is. And then also American Express Platinum has one where I get like an entertainment credit. And so Audible or New York Times subscriptions will charge my card every month and it'll just take it right off. I don't pay for it at all. And that's a wonderful thing. So well, this is great. As we've said before, there's so much to cover in travel, rewards and loyalty. And so I'm glad we get to tease out all these different nuances and applications that I think are really, really helpful. So James, Ian, thank you for your expertise. And we will get to you again in another episode next week. We'll see y'all.
Thanks, Brandon.
Bye, y'all.